Hi. It's both incredibly exciting to be with you tonight and incredibly frightening. I haven't been in front of a live, I can't even talk, in front of a live audience for 18 months, so really great to be here. And Mark, well done, and Nicole, well done, Nicola, for putting this together. I've put a brand new talk together tonight, which just adds even more nerves to my plate. And I realized that, when I work with organizations and companies, I can't often share everything I want to share. And so tonight I'm going to put a couple things that I can't usually share out there, and hopefully it makes a deep impact, because putting it together really helped me think about things differently. The talk tonight is all about comfort and our idea about comfort and how our society drives pretty much all intentions towards more comfort, more convenience, more seamlessness. In fact, it's one of the pillars that makes sales so strong. There's 3 pillars that consumers always make decisions about. The first one is this idea of hyper seamlessness, this idea that it can be as convenient as possible. And Eric Schmidt, the ex-chairman of Google, was interviewed about why he thought Zoom did so well over COVID-19. And he said, for one reason only: easy. Don't have to do anything except click one button, seamlessness. And that's seen Zoom become a giant business because of just one seamless ideology behind their consumering, rather than Skype or all the other ones that were a little bit more difficult to get into. The second one is hyper-personalization, and this idea that brands will know us better than we'll ever know ourselves. The best company right now that's doing this is Spotify. They follow a process called curate, match, and facilitate. They curate music, match it to you personally, and facilitate to you for $5 a month. I think this is the future of every business. Imagine holidays being suggested to you that Spotify does. Imagine dates or places to live or clothes, and this is all coming, and many of these brands are doing this. And the third one is trust. And the number one person we know right now that's developed so much trust around the world, that's exploded his company's valuation more than it's actually worth, is Elon Musk, because of the trust that he's created. But I'm here to talk about comfort. And comfort itself is really something, like I said, society drives itself towards. And this is what's made Zoom increase its sort of numbers by 2,900% since we started COVID-19. In fact, I'm sure there's many Zoom pilots sitting here right now. I definitely am a Zoom pilot. I spend more time on Zoom than I like to even think about. But also we see lots of brands talking about the seamlessness, and many brands have made incredible success because of just seamlessness. This example here is Domino's Pizza, the world's worst pizza by a long shot, but one of the world's best performing brands on the New York Stock Exchange. In fact, even better than Amazon on the stock exchange. And because it's such a shit pizza, they've got to be really, really good at delivering the pizza. And that's their only game. They're all about getting the pizza to you as fast as possible, because they know that's really what people want, especially when you're drunk or high. Nobody here, but everybody on the outside. When you're drunk or high, all you want is a pizza. And so they created many different ways for you to get pizza. Drones, robots, autonomous vehicles, a whole bunch of different things. In fact, I think they're actually a tech company that happens to sell shit pizza, but they've done exceptionally well. But they've created this 10-second app. I don't know if you know it. It's got 3 things it does. It knows your credit card details, it knows where you are with GPS coordinates, and it knows the pizza that you've bought most often from Domino's. So when you open the app, you have 10 seconds to press no. If you don't press no, it charges the pizza and delivers it to wherever you are. So next time you're drunk or high, all you have to do is, and hopefully a drone will deliver it to you. We also have, obviously, the behemoth of all behemoths, Amazon, who's already started testing this process of sending you 2 different boxes every week to your house. And it's just a test case. And the first box is things they think you want, and the second box is empty for the things they think you don't want, and you can send it back to them. At some places, in some suburbs, they have a hit rate of up to 70% of people accepting what's been suggested to them. So you don't even have to think about what you want. It actually gets suggested to you, just like Spotify. But this comfort's amazing in many different ways. But what it's done to us, unfortunately, it's got us to become addicted to certainty. Our whole society is set up to be addicted to certainty and addicted to comfort. In fact, we go out of our way to create as much comfort for ourselves as possible. And because of this drive towards addiction to certainty, what we have done is we've switched off our ability to reimagine what's possible. We are so keen to go back to where we were, back to some level of familiarity, back to our comfort zones, that we aren't even spending time of reimagining what could possibly be. I work with UNESCO's Future Literacy Program, and they have a trend, or name for this mega trend. They call it the poverty in reimagination. And they say the world's actually suffering from this poverty and reimagination because people are so desperate and anxious to get back to what they once knew, not actually spending the time to going to what we need to go. But I got some questions, because I think this is what we need to think about as we're going through this transition, as Mark was speaking about for 30 seconds, 90 seconds, 15 minutes, about this idea that this has been the toughest time that I think many of us have had, because we've had to deal with all the shit in our past, all the trauma that's come to the surface, and everything else that's going on around us with no certainty around us. And this has made a lot of us uncomfortable. But I've got a few questions. What if seeking all this comfort is actually causing all the chaos? And what if seeking all this comfort is actually stopping us from wanting to change? And what does the world require from us today? Massive change. Not even little bits of change, but massive levels of change. What if seeking all this comfort is actually making us stress about the change before we've even started to change? Why? Because everything we drive towards is change, is comfort, is convenience, is this addiction to certainty. And what if this comfort is causing us so much issues that we just plonk onto the couch, because this is what most of us do, when we are stressed or anxious or uncertain, we become comfortable, and we call this comfortable. But I don't call this comfortable. I call this the tyranny of comfort. It's become a tyranny. It's actually become a problem. And most of us aren't evolving quick enough to keep up with this pace, because all we've ever done is drive for more convenience and more comfort. If we think about how the world is evolving as far as business is concerned, and as far as the way we need to be setting up our businesses and how vastly different they need to become, we start to understand that this comfort is choking us. It's choking ourselves and our evolvements and the way our business structures are actually evolving into the future. The difference here is the difference between a complicated world and a complex one. And this is the world we come from, the 200 years of Industrial Revolution that was all about linear innovation. And we're moving in towards this quantum dynamic digital world that's all about disruption. There's vastly different scenarios. But let me break them down for you, because the complicated world is the world we are all very comfortable with and the world that we know very well. But it's not anything like the complex world. But let me break down the complicated world for you. The complicated world and the world we come from, and the world we come from has patterns that repeat themselves. That's why we could build 2, 3, 5-year plans, because patterns repeated themselves and we kind of knew what to expect. That's why we could use Excel spreadsheets, mathematics, and accounting to actually figure our way out of any problem we were, because we just need to extrapolate the past into the future and we were good to go. Also, this idea of a complicated world, because patterns are repeating themselves, automation becomes obvious. And when automation becomes obvious, it becomes commoditized and the price gets driven down. With many of our jobs, our degrees, and our businesses, we find a lot of commoditization happening. Why? Because everybody's got access to pretty much the same information. And lastly, and most importantly, in this world of complication, it's key for us to focus in on hyper-efficiency and economies of scale. Why? Because you're doing the same thing you did last year. You want to increase profit and drop costs. Excellent formula, has worked fantastically well for 200 years. But let's talk about the complex world that we're moving into. Because in the complex world that we're moving towards, what you have some patterns, but they don't repeat themselves. So you can't actually use accounting, Excel spreadsheets, and mathematics to work yourself out of these problems, and you also can't use automation, because there is no automation that's been created to actually solve any of these problems, because automation is great at pattern recognition, not about not having any patterns to follow. But the key difference between a complicated world and a complex one, and the foundations that change, are massive. Because in this new world that we're moving into, we need to be practicing something called economies of learning and robustness, not efficiency. And let me explain what those means. Economies of learning has two sort of ideas around it. The first one is, how do you quickly unlearn to relearn? That becomes a superpower in the future. Economies of learning. How quickly can I unlearn to relearn? Because that's how things are changing. The second thing, using machine learning and data points, how do we preempt what our customers want before they even know they want it? Utilizing, is God speaking to me?
No.
Mark, I can hear you on the mic. I hope you're not in the toilet. And robustness is exactly the opposite of efficiency. Robustness says, I need to express my business and products and services as widely as possible. Efficiency says, I'm only going to service one or two things and do it as efficiently as possible. Let me land this for you with an example. Do you remember when we used to travel a lot? And please God, we'll start traveling again soon. We used to get to the airport, we used to put our suitcase onto the conveyor belt, and our conveyor belt used to get our suitcase to us on the plane 99% of the time, utilizing a pattern repetition process that's highly automated and highly complicated. Have you ever seen videos of suitcases in the back of airports? I mean, it's a miracle they even get to us, but they do most of the time. And this is always based on pattern recognition, repeating it, bringing efficiencies to it, economies of scale, and all of this is really important and highly automated. So that's the conveyor belt and the luggage that you get on. That's the old world that we come from. But the world that we're moving into is not complicated, it's complex. And so as we take off and the plane gets into the air, now we're not in a complicated world anymore. Now we're in a very complex world. In other words, we have no idea what's going to happen to us when we're up in the air. We have no idea if a bird's going to fly into the engine, a pilot's going to die, a terrorist attack's going to happen, an operating system's going to go down. We have no idea. So what do? We build planes robustly. In other words, we have 4 engines when one is enough. We have 3 pilots when one is enough. We have 5 operating systems when one is enough. Why? We're built for complexity, not complications. We've built for robustness, not efficiency. The world we're moving into is much more a plane than it is a conveyor belt. And our comfort, our idea of convenience and certainty is keeping us on a conveyor belt and not moving us towards a plane. That's the first reason we need to snap out of this comfort. The second reason is a word that I'm sure you've learned a lot of, automation. And how it's going to be taking so many jobs and taking so many jobs away and all the sort of panic around automation. But the truth is, automation is a very simple idea if we really understand it. The first thing that automation does, it's always looking for repetition, which creates pattern recognition, which brings about more efficiencies. Every single job in this world right now has a layer to it that will be automated, if not the whole job itself. So slowly but surely, as automation gets better and better and better and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, every single person here will be affected in some way. Sometimes in convenience, because that's what happens as a consumer. But as far as work is going on, it's going to affect all of us without even thinking twice about it. I'll share with you some of them. Customer service, chatbots, obvious one. We've already started seeing this. Chatbots are still stupid. Over the next few years, they're going to become really smart. Then we're going to get receptionists, also pretty much over before it's even started because you don't really need somebody up there in the front. You also have proofreading. Forget about proofreading. I don't know if you've seen this website. It's called AI Write, I think. And you put in a heading of any topic that you want an essay written about. Anything. And it writes you an essay. Asks you how many words you want. You want it to be positive or negative. And you write it out. And if you copy and paste it and put it into Google, it's never been written before. Absolutely original AI written copy. I'm an author. My job's gone. So all jobs are going to be automated away. And of course, doctors, lawyers, accountants have already been hugely disrupted. But this is coming into every sort of area that we're working in. That's the second reason that comfort is actually not a good thing. It's a tyranny of comfort. Third reason. I don't know if you know this guy. His name is Jeremy Rifkin. He's written a couple New York Times bestsellers, but his best one is called The Zero Marginal Cost Society. He is an economist that, geez, I can't even find words. I'm so nervous around people. What's going on? How's it, guys? he advises Europe, China, and the EU. And not EU, Germany. EU, Germany, and China. Incredible guy. Mark put on a evening at, I don't know if you guys were there, at the casino, Monte Casino, where he showed the documentary called The Third Industrial Revolution. It's Jeremy Rifkin, where he talks about everything becoming free over time. Because once it's digitized, it gets repeated for almost free. That's what's called a zero marginal cost society. There's zero margin to keep creating things over and over and over. And already what we have is photos have become almost free. In fact, kind of free. You can take as many of them as you want and distribute them as far as you like, as many times as you like. Communication, kind of become free. There's so many things that have become almost free. I mean, Spotify, $5 is almost free. YouTube, entertainment, education, all these things are all becoming free. Next, according to Jeremy Rifkin, is energy will become free. And everybody will go, what the hell are you talking about? How's that ever going to be possible? That's what we used to say about communication and photos and entertainment and music. But now they are. And the next thing after that, he says, is transportation will start becoming free. So the question we need to ask ourselves, is our comfort getting us ready for this world that we're moving towards? And the big thing for me is, in a world where anything digitized becomes virtually free, how do we determine value and what do we actually place our value on? That's a huge question, and I think making many people around the world panic, because what are we actually going to start valuing as we move into this new world? But before I tell you what we need to start valuing, I want to take us back to the agricultural times. And we're talking like 300-400 years ago, and maybe even 200-300 years ago, where in the agricultural times, the most important thing we could have as human beings was our ability to understand the soil, the seasons, and our brawn. And our idea that we were strong enough to do all these things around the farm. We used to work 16-hour days, and if we did really well, we could make some vegetables or fruit and actually go trade it in the marketplace. But then the Industrial Revolution arrived, and in the Industrial Revolution, it doesn't matter how well you knew the soil or understood the seasons or how strong you were, it was actually irrelevant, because what was really relevant in the Industrial Revolution was intelligence, logical, left brain, process-driven intelligence. This is what education did for us for 200 years or so, developed this side of our brain more than anything else. But as we move into this new world, and I've shown you pretty well that all automation will take care of this almost like linear type of innovation and logical thinking, that's all been taken care of. And what we need to start thinking about in this quantum age is something brand new that many of us don't even think about often in our world, but this is intuition. And so this intuition idea is kind of like airy because nobody really knows what it really is. And so I wanted to break down what I think intuition is and why I think it becomes the superpower as we start moving into this world that we're moving into. So what is intuition? Some people call it purpose because purpose and intuition are kind of well combined. But also, added to that, some people call it adaptable quotient. Our adaptability in the process of all this change is brought about not by logical thinking, but by intuition, because intuition makes you flow and makes you much more as part of a symbiosis of a process, whereas logical left-brain thinking is just go into a straight line. There's no option for symbiosis. So this idea of adaptability quotient, for me, is made up of 3 different words. And this comes from Singularity University and Amin Tufani, who's a colleague of mine. And I watched a talk with him, and he was explaining the process of adaptability, and it really landed for me, and I thought it was really important for me to share it. What is intuition? And intuition is made up of 3 things. The first one is perception, the second one is conception, and the third one is action. Now, the point of these 3 things, and I'm going to break them down for you, is the quicker you can perceive, conceive, and act, the stronger you'll become. The quicker you can have this machine cooking inside, and you can let go of the past and create new in an adaptable, symbiotic way with so much change coming, you're going to win. But if you're stuck to old ideas, you're going to take a lot of strain. So, let's unpack perception. And I've written extensively about these topics in a couple of my books, but I think they're important to go back into. And the first idea around perception is wisdom. And wisdom, for me, is about moving from unconscious memories to conscious memories. In other words, we have memories with no triggers. You can go through life not being triggered. Anybody here been triggered in the last week? Most of us. We all get triggered. You know what those triggers are? Something from the past that tweaked. So you're like, I told you this was going to happen. I knew this was going to be the case. Typical man. You like that one, ladies? We all go through this. But these are just triggers from our past. And so wisdom gets us to let go of anything that was painful, to be able to heal all that stuff that's from our past. And you can't perceive cleanly if you're carrying all your bullshit from the past. And I know this from myself. I have a tumultuous relationship with my real dad. And I had to go through a whole process of letting go of that type of man as that type of alpha, at that type of person that I always expected all men to be. And I had to go through a process of forgiving him to change the type of men that were around me. I'm not gay, but I'm just saying men, as in business owners or business partners or people around me. I always had abusive alpha males around me. And it was because I was holding on this grudge against my dad. But I had to go through my own process, and I still go through a lot of processes to let go of all of my past and all of the irritations that I carry with me. Because remember, the more familiar your past is, the more predictable your future becomes. So if you're wise, your past gets clean and your future becomes totally fresh, and you can look at it with totally fresh eyes. So that's perception's first idea of letting go of the past. The second one is curiosity and imagination. Again, I've written extensively about curiosity, because curiosity comes from here, it doesn't come from here. There's a different sort of ideology around it. And so this concept of curiosity, best described by Walt Disney, and he has created a legacy in a business that's doing incredible things. And one of their highest values is this idea of curiosity. Have you guys seen the latest hotel they've got now? You can check into a spaceship from Star Wars for 3 days. You check in and you're in that whole starship scenario for 3 days, a transformational experience. And this is Walt Disney doing things that are incredible, all based on their curiosity and keeping it adaptable, moving from movies to experiences to products to all sorts of different things. And then we get imagination. But as far as imagination is concerned, I don't want to talk about bullshit sitting there, meditating, thinking. I want to talk about something that's real and something that we need to be speaking about much more in these sort of places. And this is from Terence McKenna. And if you know who Terence McKenna is, you'll know exactly where this is going. Because imagination needs to be tweaked. We need to add newness to it. We need to add more intelligence to it. And Terence McKenna is actually Sean McKenna's uncle. I don't know if you guys know Sean McKenna. No, I'm kidding. He's not his uncle. But Terence McKenna said something really, really deep for me. And I follow a lot of Terence McKenna's work. He did a lot of psychedelics. And we're starting to see that psychedelics are starting to come back into society, not as drugs, but as healing teachers. And we don't speak about it enough. And so what he says in this quote, which I thought was just profound, he says, psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story building. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally lay down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong. Now, this is Terence McKenna. You might think it's way out there, it's on the fringes, it's on the left field, but I'm going to show you a 1-minute video from Bloomberg. Bloomberg. You all know Bloomberg? Bloomberg? Watch this video.
Psychedelic drugs are commonly reported to trigger life-altering, mind-expanding inward journeys. But since being scheduled dangerous and illegal, any therapeutic benefits have gone largely unrecognized. Mental health treatment hasn't changed in generations, limited primarily to psychotherapy and a broad drug class called SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
So there's been no new drug in psychiatry essentially since SSRIs back in the 1980s.
These drugs have varying results, often with side effects, and can be seriously habit-forming.
Once you get on one SSRI, they've got you for life pretty much.
But this model could soon be disrupted by the acceptance of psychedelics by the medical, psychiatric, and pharmacological communities.
This is now coming at the forefront after spending 60 years in hiding.
60 years in hiding. We haven't evolved any psychiatry for 40 years in a world that's evolving second to none. We're still using the crap that pharmaceutical companies are putting into those things, not even looking towards nature to evolve, to expand, to reimagine. I wrote extensively about ayahuasca in my first book, and if you don't know what that is, I highly recommend you take a look at it. We need to start normalizing wearing tracksuit pants to big events, and we need to start normalizing looking at psychedelics for healing purposes and creating more imagination, because what we have is a framing problem in this world. We have a huge issue about people framing things incorrectly. And if you don't able to step out of your perspective, step out of the way you think about things, how are you ever going to be changing? How do we ever evolve when we're not taking something drastic to be able to help us evolve? The second part is conception, because once we've perceived cleanly, remember wisdom, curiosity with our hearts, not our logical minds, and we've been able to be imaginative beyond the expected realms of what we think is normal, we then now can actually ingest and frame what has come in. And this ingesting and framing is really quite quick because you've brought in all those new inputs with such fresh eyes. But I was listening to an interview by Kenneth Cookyer, who wrote this book. And Kenneth Cookyer is the editor of The Economist. And he's written this whole book about framing and how we have a framing problem in the world. And he said one thing in the interview that just hit me in the gut. And he said, imagine if we could reframe the relationship between China and America and what that would mean to the world and the human race. And so what we have in the world right now, unfortunately, and no offense to anybody sitting in the audience, is a bunch of old men still competing, still fighting, still killing each other, still framing the world through scarcity. Imagine we could reframe things. Now, if we don't bring anything new in, how do we reframe anything? And we need to take on this responsibility in our individual capacity, because the more angst we bring into the world, the more angst there is in the world. And so this framing issue becomes obvious when you're perceiving through curiosity and fresh eyes. And lastly, when we get to the point of action, and this idea of action becomes seamless and energized when you are bringing this information in this way. And this process for me is all about entrepreneurship and experimentation. And I think we've arrived at something I'm calling the era of forced entrepreneurship. And the reason for this is that your degree doesn't guarantee you anything anymore. The fact that you've worked long in a company doesn't guarantee you anything anymore. Your skin color doesn't guarantee you anything anymore. Your gender, nothing guarantees you anything. The only thing that guarantees you something is you, your head, and solving problems. Because no job can guarantee you anything anymore. So this era of forced entrepreneurship is not about having your own business. Don't think about it like that. Think about it in the way entrepreneurs utilize their thinking and what they do with it. Because there's three things an entrepreneur does, whether they're in an organization or not. They do three things. One, they solve new problems with no loss of enthusiasm, knowing that their reward is a bigger problem. This is Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset. This is Nassim Taleb's work around anti-fragility. This is all this idea that we should be wired for the challenge, not the solution. We should be wired for discomfort, not looking for comfort. And so this idea of experimentation also is key in this process of transformation. We haven't arrived anywhere yet. We are still deep in this transformation around COVID, and we have to be going through a process of experimenting. But if we are focused on convenience, or we're focused on comfort, focused on addicted to certainty, we can never experiment. And I know this year, myself, I've spent an exorbitant amount of money experimenting with different things, just trying new things out to see which one sticks and which one doesn't. And I don't think we're out of the sort of period of time to stop experimenting. This is the time for us to be applying ourselves in an entrepreneurial mindset with the ability to experiment. So the quicker we can perceive, conceive, and act, the better we're going to be for the world, the better we're going to add value to the world. And so this, for me, is intuition. When you're able to apply yourself on this process, you become adaptable, you become flexible, and you become optimistic, which is something all of us could do with more of. And all transformations always start off with the sad. And here we are today in a world that's very sad. There's a lot of trauma, mass trauma around the world, and we need to become okay with the sadness. I'm not going to plug my new book that comes out in 2 months, but I write a whole piece of it, a big piece of it in the front about sadness, that it's important for us to courageously be sorrowful. It's important for us to positively disintegrate so we can have post-traumatic growth. But right now, the world isn't sad. And as we start coming out of the sadness, we don't go back into any normality. We actually move into a place that's going to be incredibly strange, because nothing will be like it was. And everything will start becoming new. Have you all heard of the NFT digital piece of art sold for $67 million? Tell me that's not strange. That's strange? Now there's this new money called Bitcoin. Not strange? So many strange things. And this is just going to evolve into more strangeness. And then eventually we'll arrive at the adventure. But I think we're years away still. And I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I think anything new requires major death, major implosion. And we need to have lots of structures to be sort of bedded down for newness to start to arrive. So the point of my talk today was, please, don't seek comfort. Try with utmost effort to seek discomfort. Thank you for your attention.